Hello friends, this is Mrs. Polakowski here. Today I'm going to discuss a unique art lesson that I've created for our ELL students. I'm going to talk about the components of my lesson, the learning objectives, and the different stages of this lesson, okay? The title of my lesson is Using Prepositions When Describing a Piece of Art, an ELL art lesson. What is this lesson for? Well, it's designed for about 20 students, ELL students at the beginner level, so second grade students. This could maybe work with first grade too, but I've geared it towards second grade students in an elementary art class setting. This lesson is also combining both art content and language content. So I've designed it for a classroom with ELL students. The art component of this lesson is focusing on this famous face you see, Wassily Kandinsky. He is one of my favorite artists, so I've decided to focus on him. And I've also chosen one of my favorite paintings by him, which is called Composition 8, and it's from 1923. So this is one of his later works of art. I'm using this work of art because it has a lot of different shapes and a lot of different movement going on within his composition. So I thought teaching students how to use prepositions would be especially helpful because they can use prepositions to describe where shapes are within his composition. Okay? Just to keep something in mind, this is an art lesson. So the nature of art content tends to lead to ample studio time for students. So I decided to not just only do one lesson, but a hypothetical 3 to 5 week lesson. I will be focusing mostly on lesson 1, which will be the introduction to this unit, which will be introducing the language components, the prepositions, if you will, to our ELL students. And we also will be talking about how students can use language to describe a piece of art, okay? The activity they do in week 1 will assist them for the final project, which will take place in the later weeks. As you can see some of the pictures on my screen, they're examples of what the students will be doing. So if you see the one at the bottom with all the color, that would be kind of a prototype for the final project that students will end up with once they complete this entire lesson. And then the 2 smaller images with the triangles and circles, those are prototypes for what they will be doing during lesson 1, the activity that they will be completing with a peer. So at this time, what I'd like to do is go ahead and get started on lesson 1. This will be an introduction of learning how to use prepositions. So the biggest thing I need to do is get my students engaged. How do I do this? Well, I definitely want to introduce the painting. From experience, I know my students always love to learn about a new artist. So how do I introduce a new artist? Well, I try to get some kind of visual that's stimulating, and I found a really cool video. A graphic artist turned the Composition 5 into kind of a moving picture. So I kind of want to show a little bit of that to you right now, just so you get a glimpse. And you can see all the shapes from the original painting are moving. I would show my students this whole video. For purposes of this, I'm going to go ahead and just give you about 20 seconds or so. It's just very visually appealing, very stimulating. The movement, the color. I'm trying to get students engaged, to see all the different types of shapes, to see the color use, to see how, by moving shapes around, the overall composition changes. Now, I will have taught this with in mind that students have already heard this vocabulary word, composition. I'll go ahead and reintroduce that word to students, though. I'll ask them, does anyone know what composition means? And if no one's able to answer, I'll simply define it as the way shapes make up a picture? Like, what does the artist do within his picture to make up the entire picture? So Kandinsky is using circles, triangles, and lines specifically. And it's this relationship of where one shape is to another, which makes up the composition, which makes his work so unique. So then that kind of begs the question, how do we discuss art? How do we talk about it? Well, that's the whole idea of this lesson, is to show my students that they can use language to discuss art. Okay, they can actually present their artwork by speaking about it, by being able to describe what they put and where they put it. Okay, so that's where this idea of prepositions comes in. So I found a really great activity called Listen and Draw. I'm going to go ahead and show you a bit of that. This will be the basis of lesson 1. We did watch this already in class, and I thought it was great.
Extra English practice. I love that. Today, we want to review the prepositions, some prepositions of place, and then we want to do a listening activity that you can play along with.
Okay, so we're going to review a few of the common ones, starting with 2 that are similar but have a different meaning that we're...
Okay, so I'm not going to show the entire video. You do get the idea. These 2 lovely narrators go on to describe the prepositions, and they do it in a great way. They go ahead and describe in, on, above, below, or next to. So those will be the basis for this activity. This activity is going to also focus on the action of drawing, okay? And students will have to listen for directions. So just from this activity alone, we are able to cover all 4 components of ELL learning objectives. I have speaking, reading, writing, and listening, okay? It's really important to involve all these components, especially for the ELL student, because through listening, through speaking, through doing, we are emphasizing language skills, and we are allowing the ELL student to practice them. You know, practicing skills out loud with a friend is one of the best ways that ELL students can pick up on language. Okay, and then in the following weeks, students will take the skills they developed in week 1 and take them a step further. So they're going to take this simple drawing they created in week 1 and turn it into a more elaborate composition. They'll have at least 12 shapes, 7 to 15 lines. They'll be able to come up with their own color choice. And then they'll also be required to write in 1 paragraph, about 5 to 7 sentences, that describes the prepositional phrases they learned in class from week 1, and using these sentences to describe the placement of the shapes within their own artwork. And then the last week or so, or even the following week, students will be able to present not only their final artwork, but also read aloud their paragraph. So in this way, we're building on the skills they were learning from week 1. Okay, so at this time, I'd really like to elaborate on lesson 1. This is the crux of my lesson plan in terms of what I want to talk about today. So I am going to talk now about what the students will actually be doing. So I've already said that they're going to watch that video about Kandinsky with the moving pieces, and then they'll go ahead and watch the listen and draw video. Okay, that video kind of explains the activity. What I like to do with elementary students is remodel things and re-explain it again. It's really important to re-emphasize the lesson, emphasize directions, and check for understanding. Because sometimes you get those blank stares. They look at you, they'll nod like they know what you're saying, but they don't. From experience, I know you have to go over the directions a few times. Okay? So after we play the video, what I'll have the students do is then switch their eyes over to me, and I'll be over by my smartboard, and I also have an Elmo camera, where I can draw on my desk, and then they can see what I'm drawing on the screen, which is really great, especially for our visual learners. So what I'm going to do is walk them through step by step. The biggest thing they have to keep in mind is they want to end up with 6 shapes, and they want to start in the middle with one big shape, okay? So I will take my marker and I'll go ahead and get started. And I'll say, when you have your paper, you're going to do the same thing. So you're going to start with the shapes that we saw in his famous picture. So I might ask the students, what do you see? We'll get some hands raised, triangles, circles, lines, and I'll say you can focus on those shapes if you want, okay? And some students may not want to do those shapes, then they can do whatever shapes they want. But the big idea is that they're going to start with one in the middle, and that one in the middle is going to guide the other 5 shapes. So I will say I'm going to start with the big triangle, and inside the triangle, in it, I'm going to make a circle. They'll see me do that. On the triangle, I'm going to make another circle. Below the triangle, I'm going to make another triangle. Then I need something above. So I'm going to make a line above that top circle. And then what was my 5th preposition? I might prompt kids and ask. We had one more next to. So I'm going to go ahead and make 3 lines next to my original triangle. So at this point, I can look back over my picture and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I got 6. So I know I did that right. Okay. And then I'm going to ask students, we need to label these. So I will have a word bank with the 5 prepositions. They can go ahead and refer to that in case, they forgot what I said or forgot what the video mentioned. That way they have this visual reminder, right? Now go ahead and label those shapes. Once they label those shapes, they'll have kind of like a map, okay? So after I give students about 5 minutes or so to do that, to create that prototype picture, this is the fun interactive part. This is for my kinesthetic learners, the people who really like to get social and involved, right? We've already done kind of a hands-on activity, which is the nature of art class. But now we're even going to get more involved. So you're going to put a student with a partner. I usually have groups of 4 at my table, and they can just turn to their partner. One student will go first. They'll have a blank piece of paper, and then their peer is going to use the picture they made to describe out loud what to draw. So student A could tell student B, okay, in the middle of your paper, draw a big triangle. Next, in your triangle, draw a circle. Student B will be listening for directions and drawing what they hear. So student A will walk them through all the shapes they need to draw and the placement of the shapes, emphasizing the prepositions we learned in the video. Okay, so once they get through this activity, then they can show each other, oh, did I do it? And if they did, they'll get all excited. It will be fun. Then student B will do the same for student A. So they'll both have an opportunity to do this. You really want to walk around the room and make sure that they're labeling with prepositions so they get that reminder of using the words to the meaning, right? So at this point, we've covered pretty much all learning objectives. They've been listening. They were reading the prepositions. They also were speaking to their partner how to use it, okay? And now we can move on to some checking for understanding, some assessment. Now, embedded assessment's already been happening because I've been walking around the room making sure that students know what they're doing, modifying anything. If something's going wrong, if they have questions, I can just go up one-on-one to students and see where they're at, checking for understanding. Now, when I see that everyone has completed that initial map drawing, I should have said this before, I also do like a smiley face mini assessment. So let's just take a few steps back before they did the peer activity. After the students created their shapes, I would tell everyone to freeze. And this is what I call smiley assessment. What I'd have to do is ask students, did you draw 6 shapes? And they will take a minute and count their shapes. If they did, they can draw a circle at the top of their page. The next question I'd ask students is, did you label your shapes with the prepositions? If you did, make a smiley face. For some reason, this is really fun for young students. So when they see the smiley face, it kind of encourages